Welcome to my audiobook review of 2025 so far. As we're now at the halfway point in the year, it seemed like a good place to stop and take stock. I should point out that I'm reviewing audiobooks I've listened to in 2025, not necessarily ones that were published this year. Before looking at the stats, I felt this had been a pretty mediocre year. However, the evidence paints an even worse picture. I've listened to a grand total of 23 audiobooks this year, plus some podcasts not included here, like Uncanny from Danny Robbins on the BBC and Where There's a Will, There's a Wake, presented by Kathy Burke. Of those 23 audiobooks, although they actually include audiobooks, dramatizations, and podcasts, I gave a 5-star review to 4 of them, but only 2 of those got 5 stars for the narrator or cast as well. At the bottom of the table, I gave 7 audiobooks a 1-star rating, 5 of which got 1 star for the narrator as well. One of those I was not even able to finish. Actually, there were 2 other audiobooks I barely made it through 10 minutes of: The Blackout Murders by Anna Elliott and Charles Valley, and We Play Games by Sarah A. Denzel. I just could not take to those books at all for one reason or another. However, as I'd listened to so little, I feel it's unfair to include them here. There are also a few BBC series that I've been dipping into: The Good Life, the classic sitcom from the 70s, and Claire and the Community, a radio comedy from the early 2000s. They may make it to my end-of-year roundup if I ever finish them. Some of these reviews have already been published on my channel. Others will be coming up later this year or even next year. Without further ado, let's see what audiobooks I've listened to before I give a short summary. In alphabetical order, we have 10 Rules for the Perfect Murder, Classical Mythology, Coatbridge, The Disappearance of Moira Anderson, Curtain Call to Murder, Exeter Season 1, Glass Dolls, Grave Expectations, Guilty by Definition, Lay Your Sleeping Head, Murder at the Book Club, Murder by Cheesecake, Murder on the Orient Express, the Audible Originals version, No Country for Old Men, Slow Horses, Tarantula, The Cleaner, The Commuter, The Fine Art of Invisible Detection, The House in the Woods, The Lincoln Lawyer, The Mozart Conspiracy, The Secret Hours, and finally Who Sent Clement. Let's start at the bottom of the list. 8 books got a 1-star review: Coatbridge, The Disappearance of Moira Anderson by Sandra Brown, Glass Dolls by D.E. White, Murder at the Book Club by Betsy Reevely, Murder by Cheesecake by Rachel Ekstrom Courage, No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy, The Commuter by Robert Patterson, The Mozart Conspiracy by Scott Mariani, and Who Sent Clement by Keith A. Pearson, lest we confuse him with Keith B. Pearson, I suppose. However, No Country for Old Men gets the distinction of being so bad that I gave up completely, so well done all the others for being utter garbage, but garbage I was able to finish. My problem with No Country for Old Men is that the narrator didn't distinguish voices, while the writing gave so little description I couldn't picture what was going on or where. Some books are overburdened with superfluous description. This took a minimalist approach, like a Scandinavian interior designer. 6 of the books got a 1-star rating for both the book and the narrator. Coatbridge, The Disappearance of Moira Anderson, sees narrator Sandra Brown try to convince us and herself that her dad murdered the poor little girl, despite not a scrap of evidence anywhere. Turning to 2 psychics, one of whom said the girl had forgiven her killer, didn't lend any credence to her claims. Murder at the Book Club was just awful, with a narrator who had a horrible voice. The amateurish writing compounded a silly, predictable, yet unbelievable plot. The Mozart Conspiracy positions itself as a successor to the Da Vinci Code, but it's a pale comparison. In my review, I call it the Timu version of the Da Vinci Code. It involves tracking down a letter, but there's no tension, and the ending is a damp squib. Who Sent Clement takes a supernatural approach to mystery solving, with the relic from the 70s mysteriously sent to the present day to try to get into heaven by helping the owner of a bookshop. The whole "I don't believe you're my guardian angel" thing gets boring quickly, as do all of his questions about what he's seeing in life in the 21st century. The biggest disappointment for me was Murder by Cheesecake, the first Golden Girls cozy mystery. It failed as both a Golden Girls episode and as a cozy mystery. There was very little humor, silly St. Olaf stories abounded, and the ending couldn't come quick enough for me. Avoid. Glass Dolls by D.E. White fared slightly better, with 2 stars for the narrator Zara Ram, who made the preposterous but predictable plot slightly more bearable. The Commuter, meanwhile, was a dramatization that got 3 stars for the cast. However, the plot, which involved a disgraced FBI agent, was utterly inconceivable and relied on a lot of coincidences. 6 recordings got a 2-star review. Curtain Call to Murder by Julian Clary, Lay Your Sleeping Head by Michael Nava, Murder on the Orient Express, the Audible Originals version of Agatha Christie's classic, The Cleaner by Mark Dawson, The Fine Art of Invisible Detection by Robert Goddard, and The Secret Hour, Mick Herron's Slow Horses prequel. 3 of them got a double 2-star review for both the book and the narrator. I was most disappointed by The Secret Hours. I was expecting it to provide backstory to the characters we know from the Slow Horses book and TV series, but it didn't really. Only the opening and ending were interesting. Everything in the middle seemed like one long conversation about nothing. Murder on the Orient Express was let down by a bad adaptation and poor casting. The train is full of foreigners, but the casting agent couldn't find a single person, apart from Jane Asher and Rula Lenska, to nail an accent. Tom Conti is the worst Poirot ever. Avoid. Finally, The Fine Art of Invisible Detection is mistitled. You won't find anything about a great detective who avoids being detected herself. Instead, you get a rambling, convoluted story that is ultimately about selling land in Iceland. The others fared better with narrators or casts. Lay Your Sleeping Head sounded like it was going to be about a gay detective, but it turned out to be half gay romance and half detective fiction. The ending was extremely disappointing. The narrator was fine, but nothing more than that, so he got a 3 out of 5. Curtain Call to Murder was a mess. It's about a seamstress or dresser at a theatre who tries to figure out who murdered one of the cast on opening night. The story is told through WhatsApp messages, texts, diary entries, and speeches by Julian Clary, as both a character and the writer. The murder doesn't happen until chapter 29, by the way. The cast do a decent job, however, so they get a 4 out of 5. The Cleaner was just a mistake. I'd listened to a prequel story called Tarantula featuring the same character and loved it. I bought The Cleaner without reading the description. I won't make that mistake again in a hurry. It was a boring tale about a rogue government agent who decides to help a mum keep her son from joining a gang in London. It was the author's first novel and it shows. David Thorpe was great as usual and got a 5 out of 5. 5 recordings got a 3-star rating. Classical Mythology, presented by Elizabeth Vandiver, Exeter Season 1 by Ronnie Gunter and George Ducker, Grave Expectations by Alice Bell, The House in the Woods by Mark Dawson, and The Lincoln Lawyer by Michael Connolly. Classical Mythology is one of the Great Courses series, this time presented by Elizabeth Vandiver, who gets a 3-star rating for her narration. She struggled to speak fast enough to get all of her information into the 30-minute lectures, resulting in her gulping for air a lot. I also felt she tried to cover too much, yet I was also left feeling I could have learned more strangely. Grave Expectations is the second spooky book I listened to this year after Sent Clement. It wasn't a bad book, but it wasn't great. There were some interesting bits, but it dragged a lot. The narrator was fine, but that's as positive as I can be, which is why she got a 3 out of 5 as well. The dramatization of Exeter Season 1 got 3 stars overall, but 4 stars for the cast. They really were excellent and lifted what was just an average story. What I didn't like is that the murderer isn't even mentioned until almost the very end, which is unfair on the listener who has spent several episodes trying to guess who it might be. I took 1 star off the cast because the 2 main female characters sounded too similar. The House in the Woods by Mark Dawson is saved largely by the narrator Simon Vance, who gets 4 stars. The story itself is a straightforward police procedural with very little in the way of novelty or originality. Finally, The Lincoln Lawyer. It was a very easy story to listen to, but too much of it was about something other than the main case. The narrator Adam Gripper was excellent, and I gave him a 5 out of 5. I didn't give anything a 4 out of 5, which means that we're at the top of the list. In 4th place is the first book I listened to this year, Guilty by Definition by Susie Dent. I gave it 5 stars for the story, although I felt she shoehorned in fancy vocabulary just for the sake of it. The plot was good, though. It was let down by the narrator Louise Brealey, who I've suffered through before. I gave her a 3 out of 5, as she was slightly less bad than the other book I heard her narrate. In 3rd place is Tarantula, a John Milton short story by Mark Dawson. It's on the back of this book that I bought The Cleaner, which you'll remember I gave 2 stars to. Quite a reversal of fortunes. I gave David Thorpe 4 stars for his narration. In 2nd place, we have a dramatization, James Patterson's 10 Rules for the Perfect Murder. I thoroughly enjoyed listening to this, and I gave the cast a 5 out of 5 as well. Again, this is quite a reversal from The Commuter, which I gave 1 star to. And what pips James Patterson to first place? Mick Herron's Slow Horses. It's only June, but I've already declared this my audiobook of the year. I absolutely loved it, and Sean Barrett's narration is perfect. And yet again, this is quite a change, as I gave both him and The Secret Hours a 2 out of 5. Just goes to show that you can't trust an author or narrator to be consistent. So there you have it. Slow Horses is my #1 book of the year so far. I wonder what the next 6 months will hold. One thing's for sure, I will definitely read the 1 and 2 star reviews more, and I won't buy an audiobook without reading the description. One final point to note. Of the 23 reviews I submitted to Audible this year, 8 weren't published. That's the most of any year so far, and it's still only June. I've no idea what causes the reviews to not be published. Are there keywords that are getting the reviews blocked? Too many reviews submitted within a certain time frame? Who knows? Any ideas or tips would be welcome. Thanks for joining me on this little trip down memory lane. Be sure to look out for my next full reviews, which come out on Saturdays, and my minute-long abridged reviews, which come out on Wednesdays. Thanks for watching.